Hey guys, Steb here. Today I want to talk about a few things to be conscious of when sanding. The first thing I want to show is crisscrossing between grits. I'm going to sand this piece starting with the 400 grit to sand off the nub and making the surface flat. Notice how I'm only sanding vertically, resulting in scratches that go in the same direction. Then when I'm ready to move on to the next grit, I rotate the piece so that the next set of scratches are perpendicular to the 400 grit scratches that I just made. When I think it's ready to move on, I see that the 400 grit scratches are still remaining. It being perpendicular to the current 800 grit scratches makes it really easy to see which scratches are from which grit. Ideally, we would want the higher grit to be taking over the surface, so I just keep sanding until they're all gone. And it looks good. With this, I know for sure that there are no more scratches from the 400 grit sandpaper remaining. I rotate the piece again because I'm moving on to 1000 grit sandpaper. This is how I efficiently sand all of my flat pieces. I want to say that it's not limited to just flat pieces, but parts with complex shapes do make it a bit harder to use this method. Basically, I do it when I can. Next, I want to talk about really deep scratches. Even when we think we're sanding with, let's say, a 400 grit, the scratches produced can be much deeper than usual. A very common cause of that is using clogged sandpaper. Visually, it can be quite easy to tell when a paper is clogged by seeing the large spots on it. It also won't budge from a toothbrush even when the surrounding dusts on it get blown away. This remaining 400 grit scratch from earlier was actually the result of me using a clogged up paper as a test. Going from 400 to 800 grit doesn't take long, but the persisting scratches added maybe a minute or two to get rid of. Now, adding a minute or two more of work to get rid of some bad scratches isn't that big of a deal, but when you work on hundreds of pieces, it can add up real quick, which is why I want to talk about how we can prevent clogging as much as possible. To be real, sandpaper is going to clog. It's inevitable. That's just how it is, but there are two tricks that I use to lessen the speed at which it clogs. Number one is to be gentle. Basically, don't apply any force when using sandpaper. It's really easy to do so, especially when in a rush, but at the end of the day, it's at the detriment of the sandpaper and our projects. Number two is going to be wet sanding. Wet sanding is amazing. Just from adding water to the sandpaper, it becomes so much more gentle and harder to clog. I recommend it almost all the time, especially when using higher grits and sanding over a painted surface. The reason why I didn't include wet sanding in my last video, how to blend decals, is because I think that wet sanding has a bit of a learning curve for newer modelers. It can be hard to see what you're sanding, and it's easy to go too far without realizing it. Some other quick things that I want to mention. Sandpaper grits being used should differ from modeler to modeler, and I think there is nothing wrong with that. I know that in the Gunpla scene at least, 400, 600, 800, and then to 1000 is conventional. But our preferred brands, type of finish being used, and overall work styles should dictate what grits are being used. For example, there's a pro modeler in Japan who finishes their work at roughly a 600 grit finish, because they know that they're using a super matte finish at the end. Matte finishes are overall very forgiving towards imperfections and scratches. I think this is a pretty effective way to make quick and good looking kits if matte is a preferred finish. There's another pro who swears by using 320, 500 and then finishing at 800 grit due to it being the optimal speed while providing the paint with the best bite. Me personally, I like doing 400, 800 to 1000 because I've been enjoying glossy finishes and it's where I'm comfortable. I started skipping 600 because I felt that going from 400 to 800 is not time consuming. The crisscross method also ensures that I won't have any rough 400 grit scratches left on any of my parts when painting. I guess I should also mention too that not all sandpaper are created equal. Some brands can feel much rougher or smoother than others even if the grit number is the same. Some papers also clog much easier even if using minimal pressure or even with wet sanding. From my short time experimenting, I think Madworks and Wave feel quite rough while Tamiya's is very smooth. But they all have their own uses, so I use them for different purposes. I encourage everyone to find what they like and feel comfortable with because there's quite a wide range of sandpaper out there. And I think that's it. I guess let me know if there's anything important I might have left out in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching and see you next time. Bye.